Greetings, everyone, and thanks again for joining me on the Briar Host. I'm Dave, and today I'll be sharing my insights from my most recent Age of Sigmar tournament. It was a great experience and a very well run tournament by the Sparkle Motion team down in Oklahoma, so I'd first like to extend a thank you to Nick and Derek, the tournament organizers, as well as to Edmund Unplugged for hosting it in their space. Without further ado, let's get into the report. So with the knowledge of which missions the tourney would feature and a new balance patch out for AOS, I decided to go with a more reactive defensive list archetype. I did this for two reasons. Reason the first, I struggled a fair amount with my more mobile build into shooting matchups, which has been fairly prevalent in the local and broader meta, and I just really wanted more bodies and screens, and two, there weren't a whole lot of battle plans with more than 4 objectives, and those plans often had mechanics that reduced the number of objectives over the course of the game. So what I ended up with was this. My army's general was a Tree Lord Ancient, we'll call him Gary, along with his retinue of reinforced Kurnoth hunters with scythes. Gary had the Seed of Rebirth artifact and a beefy unit in his regiment to reduce the chances of my opponent being able to score battle tactics that depended on destroying these units. This also gave me a lot of opportunities to reduce attacks going into this blob with the bodyguard season rule, along with multiple opportunities to punish units that go fighting into them with my various fights first and fights last abilities. And if my opponent did decide to come into this unit, they would be sitting at Ren 2, often Ren 3 with the spell. And that's a pretty strong combo with damage 3 weapons. The next regiment in my list is led by a saucy little branch witch named Karen with the Spellsinger heroic trait. Her main job is giving multiple attempts to disrupt my opponent by handing out fights first should the Tree Lord Ancient's fights last ability not go off. And if that does happen, this means she can hand it out to a different unit. The theory here was to position her between 2 elements so she could support either one at once. So here's the scenario I had in mind. You'd have 2 elements engaged in combat. Karen positions herself so she is wholly within 12 inches of both of them. The Tree Lord Ancient would then try his 4-up fights last because he is in combat, and let's say he is successful. Then the Branch Witch can try to hand out her 3-up fights first to the other element, thereby allowing me to get more fights in my favor, even if it's my opponent's turn. And along with Karen, we brought a unit of Dryads, a unit of Gossamet Archers, and a reinforced unit of Kurnoth Hunters with Greatswords. In my final regiment, we had a Tree Lord, we'll call her Bethany, leading a unit of reinforced Spite Revenants and a unit of Spite Rider Lancers. Again, they're there to bring some of those fights first capabilities and score battle tactics, be a prospector, that kind of thing. Honestly, these pieces didn't quite feel like they carried their weight in hindsight. I was bringing as many War Scrolls as I could because I wanted to go for this Highlander award. It's a challenge that the TOs put out to kind of discourage spam lists and just reward lists that had a lot of variety in their army. So I will say, however, that the Spites felt pretty efficient. I mean, they're super cheap. They're at 80 points a pop. So a reinforced unit can really do some work. They're also cheap enough that, if they end up being used as a screen or a chaff, it didn't feel like, such a terrible loss to have them destroyed. So they also did some pretty spicy mortal damage, as we'll see later. The next thing we want to talk about is just the tournament environment, just kind of set the stage for what the tournament was like. Ended up being 46 players, repping 19 of the factions across the game. By far, as you can see from the chart, the most common armies taken were Stormcast and Slaves to Darkness, which, makes sense in the current meta and was another reason I wanted to get away from the variants of monsters with low quantity but high quality damage. The skill level and experience of the players varied some, but was probably pretty average to slightly above average, as we had quite a few out-of-towners, and they sent some really quality players from Texas, Missouri, and even other parts of Oklahoma. A lot of folks from the Great Plains Masters scene. It was really great to see. So, I'd say not quite a Shark Tank, but definitely not a walk in the park either. Also, for a more in-depth look at the tournament pack and the missions, you should check out my last stream, but the short version is this. There was really not that many objectives in all the battle plans, and most of them depended on making really sound decisions that factor in all 5 rounds of play, not just the current moment. So let's get into the game reports. And first up in round 1 of Taxman, I got, oh man, a matchup that I was unsure how it would play out. We went into Gargants for our first match, and I paired into a good buddy Don, who brought Broad, 2 Gatebreakers, and a trio of the little manlet Gargants, the Man Crusher Gargants. So in round 1, 2 of his Gargants were, going to be sitting on 40 wounds from the get go, and I was unsure of how things would play out. But we squared off on the Border War map, and we both deployed fairly cagey, looking to just mostly set up to score well and not expose too much of our combat power early. Don was fewer drops, so he chose to take the first turn and moved a Gatebreaker up to take their land on the midfield terrain piece, and as well took the eastern objective with a Man Crusher while setting up so he could quickly collapse on it with his other pieces. He cast a Manifestation as well and mostly just set him up so he could minimize any damage I could get into him turn 1 and still be in position to do what Gargants do best, stand on circles. In my turn, I chose the attack on 2 fronts battle tactic, with the plan to take both flank objectives by charging onto it with my Tree Lord into his damaged Man Crusher, and I had it whittled down from shooting, so I was pretty confident that if I did make the charge, I had a good chance of actually destroying that model and taking the objective from him. He ended up getting a pretty solid redeploy, though, so I ended up failing that battle tactic and went down 3 points to Don 7. Round 2, Don won Prio, and he kept the initiative. He chose the Do Not Waver battle tactic. Because he didn't commit Man Crushers to do this, I knew I didn't really have a good chance of killing any of his models and deny battle tactic. He swung into some Dryads, and I think my Gossamids, and also backed off the western objective so I couldn't effectively countercharge one of his other Man Crushers. One Gossamid ended up surviving and was able to get out of combat after I pulled the models that were destroyed. And I think Karen also got squished this round by Broad as well. On my turn, I chose Take the Flanks and sent my Lancers after a lone Man Crusher close to the board edge and my lone Gossamid to the other. The rest of my forces started to focus fire the Mega that was standing just outside my home objective. Now, I wasn't able to kill him in one go, but I got awfully close. I think this was mostly possible because I was able to connect with both my Spite Revs and my Greatswords before he could swing back. Meanwhile, Gary the Tree Lord Ancient and his Scythe crew made their way to the flank objective in order to try to spread the Gargants back out so I could focus fire them instead of them just balling up. At the end of the round, the score was 14 to Don and 10 to me. Round 3, Don won another priority roll and kept the initiative. He had a big turn scoring on primary here because he was able to get Broad onto my home objective and keep control of the flank and max out the primary. He did attempt the time to get stuck in battle tactic, but ended up failing because I was able to kill one of his Man Crushers that started in his territory before he had the chance to fight with it to score his battle tactic. While the Gargants were on my home objective now, they left their own unguarded as well. This allowed me to auto-run my Lancers, who had finally finished off the Man Crusher on the western flank, as my General's regiment took control of the terrain feature in their territory. It was at this point that I think the game started to kind of tip in my favor a little bit. Don ended up countercharging his remaining Gatebreaker into my Scythes at this point, and I can't remember if I killed him this turn, but I was able to do enough damage to really set me up for the next turn. This netted me a 10-point turn and knotted the score up at 20-20. In round 4, both of us were pretty quickly losing assets to score, and we knew it was really going to be a nail-biter. I won the roll-off this round, and I took a look at the board state and actually decided to give the turn away. I knew I couldn't really afford to take a double at this point, as points were really going to be hard to come by, and were even more important than just killing stuff right now. So he chose the Slay the Entourage battle tactic, hoping that Broad could get into Gary and disallow that fight's last opportunity with his anti-monster rampage tech. And I ended up getting a pretty solid redeploy, and Don was just not quite able to connect with him. In my turn, I chose the Slay the Tyrants battle tactic. I killed the Mega, and I still controlled his home objective and his flank for another 10-point turn, bringing the score to 26 Don and 30 me. Round 5, Don won the prio here, but there wasn't too much he could do to change the course of the game, unfortunately for him at this point. We both ended up just retaining one another's home objectives and flank objectives, which took the score to the final, which was 32 to 36 in favor of the trees. Don was a joy as usual to play against. We had a great time. Thank you again, Don, for a great experience. And Don went on to finish fourth overall in the standings, so shout out to him for a great performance. My next round of the day was a mirror match. Oh, the tragedy of the trees infighting. Austin was my opponent, and he took a more aggressive list with Belthanos, some Sword Karnoff, along with some additional casting capabilities in the War Song, as well as the Saviors of Cinderfall Regiment of Renown. I won the priority from the roll off and elected to deploy to go first, so I could make Austin take the first turn, with the potential to double into his main hammer, the Great Swords. Austin chose the Reclaim the Realms battle tactic and dropped Callus and Toll into the northeast corner and his tree revs into the southeast. He also staged his Kurnoth's swords so he could deliver them and do as much damage as he could to my main hammer in the matchup. Again, the Kurnoth swords. So this is kind of just ended up being what we had, just sort of a standoff as we waited for the other one to blink and overexpose their forces. Austin also put an Awakened Wildwood and a Soulstare Shackles out as a deterrence on the northern front, which allowed me to do a safe Do Not Waver by fighting my Dryads and Gossamids into them in my turn. I also went the Tree Lord down to the Tree Revs to tie them up and prevent them from doing more teleports and cashing in on easy battle tactics. The Tree Lord ended up doing absolutely nothing and just whiffing his attacks into them, but that actually worked out in my favor, as we'll see here in a second. I matched his primary score, and the standoff continued into round 2 with the score 7-7. In round 2, I won priority, and seeing no real value at this point in doubling, I just went ahead and gave the turn away because I had my screens up, and I didn't really see a benefit of it. Austin ended up choosing the Do Not Waver battle tactic here. He didn't really have a way to get to my hammers or anything juicy, but he did have some easy fights. He moved his northern forces up so he could get into my Dryads and Awakened Wildwoods that I had cast, but his Tree Revs ended up not being able to retreat since Tree Lord had used the shooting ability, and that ultimately spelled their demise. So he would miss out on this battle tactic because they end up getting finally destroyed by the Tree Lord. He was able to clear that unit of Dryads that I put out as a speed bump for him, though, and I also wanted to maximize my chances of charging the subsequent turn. So I casted Spiceworm Hive as the magical intervention in his hero phase, so I could use it in my next turn, as well as any other spells I wanted to cast once my turn came around. When it did come around, I think we got ahead of ourselves a little too far here, and I ended up not choosing a battle tactic, so I just went without. Austin was super gracious, and we both agreed beforehand, kind of about like what kind of game we wanted, and both made sensible accommodations. But I knew too much had happened. I think we were to the movement phase or something by the time we realized it. So we both decided that that's how just we'd proceed. I just would miss out on the battle tactic, but despite that, I was able to make a pretty significant impact this round by getting my swords to connect with his and lift the unit to the wound. I felt so bad. Austin just barely missed his 6-up ward roll on the hunters, and didn't have an opportunity to get him out, to heal him up. So sadly, that's just how the dice rolled there. But the game was still tied here at 10-10, but the tide was beginning to turn in my favor. Austin won the prior roll and took the turn in round 3, choosing the Take Their Land battle tactic for my northeastern piece of terrain. Luckily, I had my Spite Res poised here for a counteroffensive to reinforce my Sword Hunters nearby, and they were actually able to deny his battle tactic again here when enough survived the clash with Callus and Toll and reduced their control score by 3 since they were in combat. Now, I was a bit hesitant, admittedly, on the outset on the Outcast battle formation for this tourney, but I'm really seeing the benefits in this game. And with that, Austin scored a 3-point turn. I responded in kind by choosing the Take Their Land battle tactic in the southwest corner with my Lancers and my General's regiment slowly moving up. I was able to minimize his damage from his bows into my Ancient with an effective Wildwoods casting, and I continued to just apply pressure and make him commit key supporting pieces to do battle tactics and grab objectives, so I could try to get him out of position and get the sort of engagements that I wanted. This was a 7-point turn for me, bringing the score 13 Austin, 17 me. Round 4, I won the prio again, and seeing I was Still able to minimize his damage and respond to his battle tactics choices, I gave him the turn. He chose Seize the Center and positioned his Warsong, Revenant, and Arch Revenant into the center. Luckily, Gary was still close by after sending his retinue into the Kurnoth bows and ended up making a cheeky countercharge into the center and denied Austin's tactic this round as well. He also started to bring Belthanos toward my Kurnoth swords to delay them further. I've played Belthanos quite a bit in my own lists, and I saw the threat that he posed, being able to do his little whoosh kickflip onto my objective with his rampage. So I started to kind of mosey my tree lord back from where he got tied up with those tree revs back to my home objective with a redeploy. In my turn, I chose the Slay the Entourage battle tactic because Belthanos was only on a few wounds remaining. Austin was low on command points, and I knew he had to make some choices, so he saved it for a redeploy, and tragically was the dreaded one. I have been there, Austin. I am so sorry. I felt really bad because I just felt that same sort of frustration so many times with especially the monster Sylvaneth list, where the dice are just not quite cooperating with you, and just kudos to him because again he just took it on the chin, maintained a great attitude, and just never quit. I I don't know if I would have been able to do the same thing. So well done, Austin. My hat goes off to you. And then after slaying Belthanos, I scored another 7-point turn, bringing the game to 16 Austin and 24 to me. And finally, in round 5, Austin won the final prio roll and took the turn. He chose attack on 2 fronts, trying to gain control of both flank objectives and my home objective. He was able to get his surviving Arch Revenant onto my now unguarded southern flank, and Callus and Toll's regiment onto my home. Luckily, I'd seen the Scythe's utility on the battlefield as being more important back on my home objective, so I had struck and fade them the previous round and put them on my home, which made a pretty big challenge for Callus and Toll and their companions to take the objective off me. And again, Austin was unable to score with the battle tactic here. In my final turn, I chose Slay the Tyrant so I could gain some more scored battle tactics in the event of a tiebreaker in the tournament, and was only able to keep control of my home objective, but that was enough, bringing the final score 21 Austin, 29 to me. So again, Austin, thank you for a great game. My final game of day 1 was into Daniel with a very grindy Slaves to Darkness list. In a way, this sort of honestly kind of felt like a match into Gargants. He had 2 reinforced units of Chaos Warriors that could really easily get those 5-up wards. And gosh, this match really made me miss my Kurnoth Greybows. But I knew I had a shot, so I made a plan and I went with it. We were playing on focal points, so the underdog could take the central objective and make it count as a flank or home objective, and get some extra points that way. So I really thought that would play well into more defensive builds, but I think he was just the better defensive build when all was said and done. So I did still try to play for the underdog mechanic so I could reduce his scoring capacity. In round 1, Daniel had fewer drops than me, so he gave me the first turn. I did the take the flanks battle tactic with my Gossamids and Lancers and just chose to control one objective for a 5-point turn. I also positioned on my home objective so that if he did get stuck in, I would be up to Ren 3 with my scythes and start, just chewing away at those warriors. On his turn, Daniel chose the Do Not Waver battle tactic and fought with his Fell Riders on either flank into my Gossamids and Lancers. Lancers killed a couple of models, and the Gossamids survived with a single model. He hopped onto the center and western flank objective and scored 7 points, bringing the score of 5 me and 7 Daniel. Round 2, I won the priority roll and kept the initiative. I declined a battle tactic because I did not want him to just sit on objectives and make the deficit insurmountable. Instead, I focused more on doing some damage to the warriors and just try to get through all those wounds. And in hindsight, I think this was probably the wrong move. He wasn't particularly positioned well to do a tremendous amount of damage, and it allowed him to keep that 5-up ward on his unit without even having to try to make another roll. So I also just was not smart about positioning my forces to reduce his pile-ins. If the warriors can't get their entire combat width into attacking a single unit or a model, their weight of dice, can be enough to take down, even really strong units. But, if you flank them from either side, they can't pile one direction very effectively, and, they can't get those weight of dice in. So I did end up still controlling 2 objectives here, but it only gave me a 2-point turn on this battle plan, unfortunately. Daniel was then able to seize the center with his foot heroes and continue to just ham me in my deployment zone. He swapped out the now beleaguered first block of warriors with a fresh one with a 5-up ward. Another mistake I made here in hindsight was just not pursuing the remnants of that first unit. This allowed him to rally him back and bring him back to fight in later rounds, and really made a big impact. So this brought the score to 7 me and 14 Daniel. In round three, I won the priority and just kept the initiative going. I knew that I was going to have to claw back a win if I was going to do it at all, and I had to start scoring some points. So I chose the Reclaim the Realms because my Gosmids and Lancers were in position to safely control the far quarters, and my 2 units of Kurnoth were now decisively engaged with that new unit of warriors. That was that was bad news for me because that's a lot of points tied up into an unfavorable combat, and just denying my ability to maneuver and score primary and get on objectives. Daniel also put his foot down on the gas this turn though, and was able to control all the objectives and get his ordained charge battle tactic off with a big 10-point turn here. So this is where I really felt any chance of winning start to slip away. In round four, Daniel won the prio and gave the turn away, knowing that he was in a position to control the game, which made a lot of sense. I had sufficient forces to have a go with the Do Not Waver and get back on some objectives, including Daniel's Unguarded Home objective. My remaining Tree Lord and Lancers charged into what Daniel and I affectionately called the Danger Pickle manifestation and capture that objective, as well as flipping the center to a home so I can control 2 home objectives, which got me a 9-point turn, but Daniel was still firmly in control here. On his turn, he again grabbed all the objectives in the warrior blocks that I could not chew through. Ended up killing my Tree Lord, and his last Fell Riders just cashed in on the take their land battle tactic where they were hanging out in the corner, and that just really slammed the door to victory in my face. We talked about the final round. When it was all said and done, Daniel was the victor, 40 points to my 28. Daniel played a super clean game. We had a lot of fun celebrating one another's successes. He's part of a really great team in Oklahoma called Malortal Wounds. If you ever get a chance to go to a tournament they host, or even just with them, you won't be disappointed. Daniel also went on to finish 8th in the tournament standing, so congrats to him on a top 10 finish. Well done. My pairing into round 4 again left me wishing I was playing a hypermobile Monster Mash list. This is because we matched up with Jonathan and a mean herd of trolls. Jonathan came up from Texas and brought a nasty list of Trug, 2 blocks of reinforced trolls, a dank old Trogoth, some foot heroes, and supported by some Spore Splatter fanatics and reinforced shooters. We were playing unlimited resources, and from deployment on, I knew John was well prepared for this fight. Round 1, Jonathan was fewer drops and elected to have me go ahead and take the first round. I suspected this, was going to be the case from setup, so I did the take the flanks battle tactic again with my Gosmids and Lancers, and put myself in position to stay off the objectives and only score when I needed to. Jonathan's turn 1 was much bloodier. I didn't get a big enough roll on my Gosmids to get out of danger with a counter shoot at redeploy, and his trolls easily charged and destroyed them. He continued to play pretty cagey, only moving up far enough to get his take their lands battle tactic and staying out of easy threat range with my sword hunters. He saw that I was playing more reactively and started ticking that clock, cashing in on 3 objectives and raising that score 4 to 10 in his favor. In hindsight, I think I should have, maybe marched onto an objective or redeployed onto an objective to reduce his score as well, but I don't think that would have really made a difference, as you'll soon see. Round 2, I won prio and just kept the turn ordered, feeling the pressure to connect and do some kind of damage. I just could not, lift these trolls, and if they were in my face, that was going to be a big problem. So I selected the Do Not Waver and went into his fanatics and shooters at the far north, setting up to have my High-Rend Scythes poised for a fight's first activation if he committed his forces in. This also allowed me to score a max 10 points on my turn. John proceeded to get some key foot heroes into the middle while accomplishing the Seize the Center battle tactic and start to do some real work with his trolls. I just could not get through with those fights first, fights last activations, and any damage I was able to do just couldn't make it through those thick troll hides in those 5-up wards. And John was going to score here and bring it up to 18 to 14. Round 3, John won the prio and took the double. He didn't score a whole lot in the way of points, but man, he did a lot of devastating damage, and put some key debuffs that were really impactful this round. My Kurnoth got hit by the Gobblepalooza, so they couldn't receive commands, and his trolls got up to run 4 and were chewing through my scythes. On this turn, I think I tried the attack on 2 fronts, but I had already saw the writing on the wall, and I knew I was not in a position to really claw my way back. I finally got my swords into his 2 leader trolls, and I should have just focused all my damage, impacts, hits, and the swords into Trug, because he was able to ward enough to stay alive, fight, and nearly back to full health again afterwards. So it just was a frustrating and poor decision on my part. In round 4, I'm 1 prio going into the round, and I knew I had to try to make some kind of play for the primary game because I was just not doing it in the damage department. So I had a plan to get my dryads over to the other side of the board that he could not get primary score on. So in the previous round, I'd casted a tree into his back lines so I could teleport my dryads over in my turn. They were able to grab a terrain feature for take their land, and I shuffled off an objective to flip it back to him controlling it so I could take it back this round. But I knew my chances to victory were pretty slim. And it was at this point that Jonathan shut the door in my face. Oh man! In this turn, he teleported Gobblepalooza back to the northeast objective and turned off commands for my dryads, making their plan to redeploy and then get on that objective all but impossible. So at this point, we knew the deficit was too much to overcome, and we talked out the rest of the game, ending in 40-20 in favor of John. He played a super clean game, and we had a good time reflecting on what worked, what didn't over the course of the match. And he also managed to finish 7th overall. So kudos to him on a victory against me and another strong showing at this tourney. Before we get into round 5, I need to take you back to my very first GT as a little sapling of a Sylvaneth player. One of my first games was into a Slaves to Darkness list that had a heavy emphasis on Vanguard. While they're still nasty today, at that time they were particularly hard to deal with. That, coupled with not really fundamentally understanding the game and the core rules, I was in for a bad time. That game was a guy named Travis. He was more experienced than me, but he was not condescending, didn't try to bully me. He's a super cool dude. And while he thoroughly beat me that game, he also made it a point to help me understand and just learn more from the match. Now, I certainly remembered the experience, and when I saw him again at a Missouri event he was TOing, he just had no recollection of the game whatsoever. So now, whenever we see each other, we joke that we don't remember one of those names and give one another a good ribbing. So this is the sort of thing that I really love about the community. You just start to develop these really cool friendships and relationships with folks, and you just have these really enduring memories that you carry forward with you. So you can imagine I was excited when I actually got to pair into him again and have an enjoyable final game with somebody that I knew. So we peppered in these jokes, flubbing one another's names on purpose, and just had it was just an awesome time. What a great way to end the tournament. And better yet, oh gosh, it was just such a nail biter of a game. And on one of my favorite battle plans, the Jaws of Galette. In round 1, we were both 3 drops, and I happened to win the deployment roll off and gave Travis first turn. He had Neve and some prosecutors poised to take the flanks for the first battle tactic, and he also controlled 3 objectives. The prosecutors were also able to lift my lancers with a big 3d6 charge, and his long strikes began to chew away at my gossamids immediately, starting what would be a very bloody match. I then chose a tactic I was kind of on the fence about, mostly because I was content to go down early to get that really significant underdog bonus of being able to remove objectives. But man, it was a hard choice, and I chose the attack on 2 fronts battle tactic to try to hop onto my home objective, which I deployed off of, and then also get onto that southeastern objective with admittedly pretty tough 8 or 9 inch charge. I chose this thinking that if he got a good redeploy, I could move the gossamids onto the objective after they shoot as an insurance policy without having to charge. But Travis thought of this, and he had his long strikes into positions that, if I did try that, he could pretty easily countershoot the remaining 1 or 2 off of the objective and just destroy him and deny the battle tactic. So I just went ahead and accepted that I was not going to get a battle tactic this round and started instead to make moves with the rest of my forces for a better setup for subsequent turns that would be more impactful, while continuing to screen out that super good shooting and those scary reclusions waiting for me in the sky. I charged my swords into his prosecutors, and they were able to lift them and kind of start slingshotting me toward that northwestern objective as well. Score here was 10-2 in favor of Travis, and that was quite the deficit to see. In round 2, Travis won the priority roll and took the turn. He chose Reclaim the Realms and used his priest to translocate into my backlines and the rest of his pieces to achieve the battle tactic, as they were just naturally already positioned to do so. He continued to chip away at my Spite Revenants with his long strikes and moved Bastion up to just absolutely obliterate my remaining Gossamids. And the True Lord did not want any of that. Bethany just started guiding away from Bastion and traded that space for time so we could deal with the threats that we were facing. Sequester Soulsworn had been sitting on Central Objective, and I knew that was the best place for my general's regiment to go so they could score some points and help me bubble wrap the rest of my army from the impending descent from those reclusions. So, with this in mind, I chose that safer battle tactic, do not waver, so I could fight into a burning head he had cast, as well as Neve's companions in the northwestern objective. Finally, I removed that northeast objective at the end of my turn after scoring and gave me a 10-point turn, bringing the score 20 to 12, still in Travis's favor. Round 3, Travis won the prio and just continued the initiative. At this point, I was beginning to pull out objectives and force Travis to bring on some reinforcements into those not so favorable engagements. He chose to take their land and successfully translocated his priests back into her little hidey hole corner in my back lines, and brought the reclusions in and tried to charge into my swords at the northwest corner, but unfortunately for Travis, he failed that 8-inch charge with that reroll. That was brutal. With just a few Quester Soulsworn remaining, my turn 3 was dedicated to destroying that unit and scoring Seize the Center with my general's regiment. And my general. It was a cinematic showdown. The Soulsworn stood their ground, and one Stormcast stood with a single wound remaining. So, while I failed that battle tactic, I was beginning to feel like I was starting to gain ground. I removed the southeast objective, and that clock began to tick. The score is now 22 to 18, with Travis still in the lead. In round 4, Travis won the roll-off, and we shot right into it. He still had his long strikes, and he focused them all on my Tree Lord Ancient, aiming to achieve that Slay the Entourage battle tactic. Gary looked Death straight in the face and told him to try his best, because today was not the day. His long strikes managed to strip 10 wounds off of him, and 2 nasty foot heroes were barreling towards him. So my Spite Revenants had luckily made their way to delay that assault and were successfully keeping the general alive. Gary would live to fight another day. Reclusions were closing into the center objective fast and would come down to the wire. Travis still held one objective and scored 2 more points. On my turn, I picked Slay the Entourage and brought the remnants of my Kurnoth with Scythe to bear, and finally sent Bastion back to Azure. Cashing in on a battle tactic and maxing out primary points, and I removed that last objective that Travis controlled. Meanwhile, Travis had summoned reinforcements in the form of his prosecutors and were now pressuring my home objective. My Dryads continued to guard the objective with their lives, the outcast battle formation again coming in clutch. Just a handful of Dryads locked down that home objective from the prosecutors and his foot hero. I knew the tide was turning, but I had to think of my next battle tactic. So in my hero phase, I had also cast a Wildwood Deep into Travis's territory so I could teleport my surviving Tree Lord within range of a terrain feature. I removed that northwest objective, scored 10 points. I brought the score 24 to 28. I had finally taken the lead. Travis won the final priority roll and chose the do not waver battle tactic because his prosecutors and priests could very safely fight into the Dryads, and they did actually end up taking that objective off me. He also got a few of his reclusions and long strikes onto the central objective in an effort to score 4 more points, but I was able to countercharge my scythes into the long strikes and keep control of it, resulting in a 6-point turn for him. In the final round, I chose the take their land battle tactic that I had set up for, then made a dash to retake my home objective. My Branch Witch unfortunately did not have a big enough run roll to get there, so it was all up to Gary to make that charge into the prosecutors. So I picked up my dice, I rolled them, and he failed the charge. Okay, I had a command point. It would come down to this. I rolled my dice, and he got there. He got onto the objective and sealed the game 38-34 in favor of the trees. Travis, if you're listening, fantastic game. Would love to play you again. What a memorable game to play. And with that, the weekend of the games had ended, and I had finished with the best record I've ever had at a GT, 3-2. So not quite up to the 4-1 or 5-0 I'm aspiring toward, but yeah, some exciting progress for me. It was a blast to play into some really quality opponents and no repeat matchups. I love that. I want to extend a sincere thank you again to Nick and Derek for organizing the tournament and just really picking engaging and exciting battle plans, incorporating usable terrain. That's another thing that I really liked. The terrain was a little bit more impactful in a lot of tournaments, and overall just a really great atmosphere. So thanks, y'all. Overall, my take on the defensive list archetype is, I'd say, still just not entirely complete. I think I need to do some more reps and get a really informed idea of how effective it is. But my initial perspective after this is that it's much more forgiving than some other more mobile builds. The flaw I'm seeing, however, is that it provides more opportunities for your opponent to just not engage with you and select to fight on their own terms. And I think this can probably find you some success if you were to implement this kind of build and surprise some people with those combat activation antics. But when you approach the higher skill level of players and top tables, it's probably going to struggle to score points as effectively as you'd want it to. I do think I'll try more iterations of the list without the handcuff, the Highlander format, and I'll keep y'all posted on that. That is going to close us out for today. I want to say thank you so much for those who have commented, provided feedback for the channel. I really value your insights and your interactions. It's what makes this community so great. I'll look into continuing to make tournament reports like this one if you enjoy this kind of content. So let me know so I can prioritize it over some of my other plans. I have a couple more GTs I'm planning on going to this year, so make sure you have notifications and such turned on if you're looking to hear more about what that's like and what's going on in the Great Plains Master scene and AOS at large. I'll also include some shorter videos covering RTTs and hopefully even some practice games. And until then, thanks for tuning in. Keep those branches pointed to the skies and stay sparkly.